Welcome everybody. This is Successful Work Transitions. I'm going to talk a little bit and then there'll be a Q&A at the end for reflections, discussions, your thoughts. Please do keep sharing your thoughts about transitions in the comments so I can make sure I weave them in. So when we talk about work transitions, what do we mean? So a lot of people automatically think career transitions, and that is definitely part of it. But I'm talking today about much more broadly about work transitions. So that is anything from a new role at a new company to coming back from maternity leave, going through your role being made redundant, but it could even be changes like being called back to the office 5 days a week or going from part-time to full-time. It could be contractual changes, a change in manager. That can be a huge change that people go through. That can affect every part of your working life. It could be going for promotion and not knowing quite how to get there. Or it could even be taking the strategic change in your own hands and taking that proactive approach to developing your own career and those next steps. So anything to do with change in your working life. And we know that home and work are never completely separate. So I often find when I'm talking to people about work transitions that there's a real overlap. So it'll be a new job at a new company, and that means extra days in the office, and that means changes to childcare. So you can never really just isolate one change. And often we might even have something at home that's really impacting change at work. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about changes at work and work transitions. And I do work with a lot of people that are going through transitions. I find this area particularly interesting, hence it being my speciality. And it's not unusual to struggle with work transitions. And there are quite a few reasons for this. So let me get my slides going. So a lot of people actually underestimate the difficulties of change, even positive change. That's because our brains as humans are wired to want stability, to want the status quo. So when something changes, it's just generally really hard for humans, even if something's really positive or we've taken the reins ourselves with that change. We for weird reason, think that we have to manage everything alone. Like we take everything on, I've got to figure this out, I've got to figure this out. Particularly with really ambitious, driven people, I see this time and time again. Going through a transition often means there's more stuff to be done. And that can lead to rushing, feeling overwhelmed. And then that has a knock-on impact with having the time to reflect, plan, and adjust, which is actually super important for getting through change successfully. Totally normal to have confidence wobbles, no matter what that change is, absolutely normal. And a lot of us then start to reach out for advice from friends and colleagues, which is really important. It's very important to have a support network around you, but that can lead to frustration because these people obviously care about us, but they've also got their own biases. That could be a bias because they just want us to be happy because they love us. Or it could be that actually there might be some work bias or political change going on in the background that means maybe particularly within an organisation, you're not necessarily getting the most objective or confidential advice or ideas. So for those that don't know me, hello, I'm Anne Harrod. I've got first-hand leadership experience over 16 years in global corporates like Reckitt, Johnson & Johnson, Premier Foods. And I worked out in those kind of 16 years plus, I had over 15 work transitions. There may have even been more smaller ones there, but that's a lot. And it's quite common. And most of those, I would say, I didn't have as much support as I felt I really needed or could have done with at the time. This interest in this and wanting it to be better for other people has led me to do what I now do. So I'm now a qualified coach and an accredited senior practitioner with the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. And I'm not your stereotypical coach. So those that know me will know if you're into personality profiling, which I find fascinating and now do as well. I'm an ENTJ in Myers-Briggs, or colours insight profiling. I'm 97% blue, believe it or not, a blue, red, green, yellow. So that makes me quite direct. It makes me challenging, and it makes me really results driven and very tangible. So why is it important to focus on successful work transitions? It's a big opportunity for you to steer your own ship in your career and your work life and the impact it has on your home life. And it can be a real step change opportunity for growth, both personal and in your career. They can affect the long-term progress and success of your career. The difference between successfully navigating a major change and not doing it to the optimum of your ability has that long-term impact. Transitions have a really narrow window for success. So acting quickly gives you that better shot at success and staying ahead of your peers. And not acting can sometimes lead into that kind of spiral of overwhelm, confusion, too many opinions, and not being able to see the woods for the trees. This is me and my husband, Cullen. This is me steering the ship. If you canoe or kayak, you'll know that the stronger person goes at the back and the strategic steerer goes at the front. We have to be both in our careers. You need that powerhouse at the back, but you need to be able to take control at the front as well. Transitions affect stress and emotional well-being. Change and big decisions can be really anxiety inducing, frustrating, even when they're going well. Because I see people going, I'm not going fast enough. I need to do more. I need to get there quicker. That can escalate and affect both the personal well-being and, of course, professional performance. We know if we're stressed or we're feeling emotional, we're not at our best. Taking action quickly and being proactive about it can lift those emotions, making everything smoother, more enjoyable, more productive. But if we don't take advantage of that narrow window in a transition, that action could result in prolonged stress, decreased job satisfaction, and a lot of people come to me describing a lot of mojo, just not feeling the energy anymore. This is my dog Alba. She has perfected an enjoyable, relaxing and productive life there with her little Christmas turkey toy. Transitions are also about maintaining confidence. I certainly discovered this myself. The more senior I got in my career and my career progressed, the expectation of, yeah, no problem, I'm confident, everything's fine, and everything's under control increases. And that actually becomes lonelier and more stressful. You're expected to be this swan all the time, yet actually you've got less contact time with the people you need to support you the most. And you have to look like you've kind of got it all together, and no one has it all together. That can lead to feeling like an imposter, losing confidence, and that could be totally crippling if not dealt with. There's a spiral I see people get into with these imposter feelings and that loss of confidence, and that can just really flatten everything in their lives. So it's about acting quickly to stop you holding your own self back, to be putting your best foot forwards and maintaining the confidence. And if that's not done, and I sometimes see people come to me in these kind of crisis situations, they're losing that credibility at work, feeling incredibly frustrated, and then question why they're being overlooked for things like promotions. Recent experience I had of these kind of imposter syndromes was I teach women to lift weights in my spare time. And this was when I qualified as a gym instructor. There's me on the right there in the pink jumper kneeling down. I was not the skinniest. I was not the strongest. And I had to keep remembering myself that I have as much knowledge and credibility and I'm as good as any of them. But this was a world it was all completely new to me, felt completely out of my comfort zone. But it's also one of the most satisfying things that I do. So doing all of these things successfully is why you're here today. You may be familiar with the change curve, and the Kubler-Ross, no relation, unfortunately, change curve. And no matter what kind of change you're going through, you follow this curve, even if it's a positive change, just it might feel slightly different. The duration of getting to these steps varies based on the situation and the person and what's going on in their world. But there's always an element of shock or surprise, the disbelief, then the frustration because things are different or I'm not moving quickly enough, Then the low mood and the, oh, this is just not what I was expecting it to be, or I want to be better. Why am I not being better? Then that experimentation stage is when you start to come through it. What can I try that's new? How do I get a different perspective? Then learning how to do that work in that new situation and starting to get the momentum. So when you're really starting to feel good. And then finally, integration stage. And I love the way this describes this as a renewed individual, because the line is genuinely higher at the end, because this change makes us better. So long as we don't get stuck in that frustration, depression bit at the bottom, and it can be squiggly. People can go back round in that bit. So there are three major elements that are important for successful work transitions: clarity, reflection, and preparation. And they're all underpinned by support. I just think of it as a kind of enabler for these other elements. Let's go through these one by one. So clarity is the first one, and there are three elements to clarity for successful work transitions: mindset, resilience, and proactivity. So starting with mindset, a lot of people lack the confidence and self-belief to have these successful work transitions because they feel these imposter feelings, limiting beliefs because of the stories that they tell themselves, and they get influenced by others and too many opinions or ideals from LinkedIn or social media. We get bombarded with all this stuff and it affects how we feel, especially when change happens, when we can be a little bit more all over the place. But the right mindset is really important for you to be able to positively spot opportunities within a change, handling those challenges in your stride, being proactive, which then builds confidence, reduces that insecurity and self-doubt, and overall increases motivation. So having the right mindset is super important. To do this, you need to understand where you are right now and be really honest about the stories that you're telling yourself and the emotional responses. How are you feeling? Why are you feeling? What triggers that? Then stepping back and looking at it more objectively, unpacking those barriers stopping you from having the thoughts, the feelings, the approach that you want to have. It is important for developing those helpful thoughts for a growth mindset. You might have heard this before, and essentially a growth mindset is the belief that I can and I will, and that I can learn and do anything. And we're humans and our brains are incredible and we really truly can. Mindset's important for focusing on positivity. And I don't mean to the point that we ignore the tough stuff. It's about trying to see it in a way that's maybe more true and less negative. As humans, we often go to negative, particularly in a period of change. And you need that growth mindset and that positivity and those helpful thoughts to then explore ways to take control and move forwards, move into that experimental phase of the change curve. Secondly, resilience. Change is undeniably tough. Really throws all of us, even if it's positive. It uses tons of energy. It's exhausting. There's loads of fear from uncertainty, and it can be demotivating and frustrating for all sorts of reasons, either because it's not going the way we want it to, or it's not fast enough, or I'm not being the way I want to be, or I'm not getting to where I want to get to. And I see loads of people come to me when their resilience is run down by toxic work situations, really difficult bosses, cultures that smash their confidence right down, stuff going on in their personal lives that's really starting to affect their work. Change and having to make big decisions really does knock that resilience. So we've got to top it back up. It's so important for strengthening the ability to handle those emotional challenges, keep that positive outlook, and reduce stress. So to build that resilience back up in times of change, I work with people on identifying and reframing those unhelpful things that they tell themselves. As an objective person listening to someone sometimes, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That'll be the opposite of what you said a couple of minutes ago. Or how true is that statement? pinpoint what's helping and hindering their resilience is really important for recognizing those triggers and eliminating them one by one. And then there are coping strategies. They're really unique to all of us, right? Some people rebuild their resilience by having time rebuilding their headspace with a run. For some people, it's reading. For some people, it's getting more sleep or eating differently or having mindfulness sessions at work, whatever floats your boat. That personally isn't a one for me, but lots of people love that. Whatever is right for you as an individual to relight that fire and keep strong. And finally, in the clarity section is proactivity. Those that have been hiring managers will, I'm sure, share this reflection, but whenever I was hiring anybody, I was always looking for proactivity because you can kind of teach and shape the rest. If someone is proactive, excited, moving forwards, the rest you can do. And it's a major differentiator I see between successful and unsuccessful work transitions. You have to be the captain of your own ship here, take charge of your own situation, because it gives you more control, and that then helps with confidence, etc. It helps you clarify what you need and want from the change, and it genuinely gives you a competitive advantage over your peers. Having the strength to be proactive like that does rely on that mindset and resilience work having been done first. These elements I'm talking about successful work transitions almost layer up. You've got to build some foundations and then build from there. And the reason that you need that stuff is because that puts you in the right place then to go and grab those opportunities, to ask for what you need, to not wait for permission or an instruction. Once you've done that work, you have to define your own values and goals. When I was in corporate, people talked about this a lot, and I was like, yeah, I know my values and I know what my goals are. But actually having to sit down and write them down or talk about them, a lot of people struggle to articulate them. And I did as well, actually. I thought I knew them, but then when I was really challenged, I didn't. And it took me taking some time out for me to be able to really just work through what that was for me. But it's important to take that time either for yourself in general, of course, but also specific to the change that you're going through. Figuring out how to get the info or connections you need next is also really important to be able to make this a success because you can't do it alone. Understanding what you can control and what you can't control. I love the circle of control. If you're not familiar with it, it's essentially a circle with all the stuff in it that you can control about anything and all the stuff outside, all the stuff you can't. And we have to be okay with what we can control and what we can't control. And elements of how we choose to control those controllables will vary between people and change. And that's where you might need more of that experimentation on the curve. How do I control the controllables and let go of the uncontrollables? So I'd love to share Sarah's story. So this is a real client story here, but obviously anonymized. It's nice for me to see your faces. There we are, that's better. So when Sarah came to me, she was a senior leader in the data industry and she just landed a new job. And she's got out of her old job because she'd been in quite a toxic work environment. That's how she described it, with a manager that put her down quite a lot, clearly had their own sort of insecurity issues going on. And she was in between that time of having left there and starting the new job, but it left her doubting all of her skills and her ability because she'd been knocked down and knocked down and knocked down. And I've certainly been in this situation. And she was preparing for her new role by reading books and doing some planning herself. But it wasn't enough to really make her feel positive, excited. And she kept saying, I'm just not who I used to be. And I don't want to go into this new role feeling like that and not being able to give my best to the team. And there were two other elements that were interesting for Sarah was she hadn't led people for a while. So she felt like she was going to be rusty going back and leading a team, but also that she needed to go in strong and everything. She looking like she knew what she was doing. And the other thing was that it was going to double her commute and she had kids. And that then was going to have a knock-on impact on her home life, her hobbies. And so she had all of this stuff going round in her head. not knowing how she was going to be able to. She said she wanted to feel more positive about the change because logically she knew it was, but she just couldn't get there. So I worked with her to identify those roots of that self-doubt. What stories was she telling herself that maybe in part she'd been told by someone else and started to believe, or got in her mind and were whirring round? And reminding herself what she was capable of, her successes, her transferable skills. And she was super busy with family, with work. So just having that appointment to think just helped her go over again those more positive stories. And she started to slowly trust those abilities again. And when she was in the new work environment, and thankfully it was exactly what she hoped it was going to be, it was so different to her previous place and her different manager, that she then started to experiment with a few different things, realized things were working. She was getting the feedback that she needed. And then she started to figure out through experimentation what was going to work with her home life. How is she going to balance her own personal resilience needs with the new role? And she was flying. She was starting to get all these little quick wins. She was starting to notice that she could do it again. And she became a trusted leader really quickly because she'd started to remember what she was capable of and what she could do. And she was really starting to understand that the change that she needed to make needed to start from within her, and then it was starting to project out. And she was like a different person afterwards, and it was really wonderful to see. And she's still at that organisation and seems to be doing really well, and we keep in touch. So that's Stara's story, and certainly when she came to me, I recognised quite a lot of that. And I'd been in a situation where I'd left a company and certainly felt like my confidence was shot. And sometimes we just need to have that extra little bit of help to get us out of that and back into where we want to, so that we can start as we mean to go on. So I hope Sarah's story there is helpful. Just resharing my screen. Oops. Here we are. So that was clarity. The second element of successful work transitions is reflection. So much easier said than done. And I'm going to talk through reflection, and there are two things to consider with reflection. One is time to think, and the other one is digging deep. So firstly, time to think. If we don't make time to think, we make rushed decisions, we have more stress, we have actions not aligned with our goals. If I had £1 for every time I'm too busy or stressed to think, I'd be a multi-billionaire by now. This is so much easier said than done. I totally get that, especially with busy lives. And when we start something like a new role or are going through a change, there's lots more information, lots more things to consider. But making the time to think is absolutely crucial for successful work transitions. That's why the sessions that I do with people, I call them thinking appointments. Because I don't know if any of you have ever been into going to the gym. As I've shared, I'm quite into going to the gym, but I didn't used to be. And I'm a runner first, gym second, really. But I had to have a personal trainer, not because I didn't know what I was doing in the gym, but because it was an appointment I had to leave work for on time, get there, be changed, and ready on the gym floor for. I just turned up, didn't have to think about it, and just got on with it. And that's what these sessions are for. So that time in the diary really holds people accountable. I just do 1 hour sessions, not too long, and they're convenient and booked in advance, so there's no excuses. I actually rarely get people rearranging appointments because I think they really appreciate that it's in the diary, I got to do it. Creating that right environment for that specific person to do their best thinking. Everybody has a different preference, everybody has a different style. So making time and space for someone to do it in a way that works for them is really important. And creating a space for emotions where there's no judgment. I once had a manager, I'd stepped up quite a bit in my leadership role in one move. I was feeling a bit overwhelmed and just shared. I was ranting. You know, there's a difference between a direct report ranting and just needing to get something out and actually wanting help. But I was just sort of venting that I was finding it a bit too much. And they said, if you can't hack it, there's like 10 people behind you who want this role. So, crack on. And I thought, we are not going to be having these kinds of conversations. Okay, that's clear. I'll either have to keep them to myself or find somebody else. So it's important to have a space where there's like zero judgment. And we judge ourselves too. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but I always used to put some time in on a Friday afternoon. It was development time. It was going to be an hour where I could read a book or work on my development plan or do some research, work on myself. And it never happened. Or if it did happen, I was judging myself all the time. And it just wasn't very helpful for me. Then I just put other things in instead, which is not very helpful for me. And the nice thing about having somebody completely external is 100% focused on you and always in your corner, not having another agenda. Digging deep is the second part of reflection. And again, this is easier said than done. I actually think reflection is one of the hardest parts of successful work transitions. And that's because you need to get to the bottom of the roots of thoughts and feelings. Quite a lot of people come to me saying, I'm starting a new role or I'm going through a change, and I want to deal with feedback that I've had in the past. And I want to really figure out why I've not been able to improve on this or go any further on this area of my development. And often it's because they're struggling to get to the true roots of why they're behaving the way they are or thinking the way they are. And it's really important to understand what's going on deep down for overcoming those obstacles, addressing those underlying issues, developing strategies to actually deal with the root problem, and then moving forwards authentically in a way that suits that particular individual, not just like a standard advice. And without digging deep, I see people getting stuck in these repetitive thinking patterns or these cycles. Then they feel more frustrated. They can't move forwards, and ultimately it hinders their development. You can only go so far in your career and your own personal development without really like digging deep into some stuff. So that's why I work with people on getting to those underlying beliefs. They can sometimes be experiences or triggers. So somebody I worked with real perfectionist issues actually discovered that they probably got it from a strong sense of competition with a sibling when they were younger, and that actually that comes up for them a lot when they're thinking about how do they outpace everybody else or how do they get things perfect to be better than everybody else. Those new insights into themselves help people move forwards in a much more effective way and develop those strategies to grow. To do that, I have to listen really deeply. That means I might notice contradictions, or I might notice an emotion, or I might notice a story that's being repeated that I'm not entirely sure is true. And that allows me then to ask really challenging questions. So you just said that, but before you said this, what do you think about that? Or how true is it that that's the case? Those challenging questions from somebody outside means sometimes you have to face some of that difficult stuff, but that's a good thing because it's how we grow. So I wanted to share with you David's story. It was another one that really resonated with me. David has started a new role at a new, much bigger global company. And he didn't come to me at first because he was really confident, but he soon found himself coming up against a load of really unexpected challenges. He was really struggling to connect with his new manager. They were like chalk and cheese. They felt really overwhelmed by the high expectations and just sheer volume of opportunities to shape the role. Don't know if you've ever been in a situation to shape a role. Sounds super exciting. You really want to do it, but there's so many options that you're like, oh, what do I do here? The expectations aren't always clear. That then led him to feel really isolated because he felt he couldn't get to the point he needed to with his manager to get the support he needed. So he felt really lonely. And then he just didn't know where to go with all these options. And it was a global role. So he had lots of different countries, coming at him from lots of different angles. And it was just starting to feel a bit out of control. And at first he tried to handle it on his own. And he just thought, I'll just keep working harder. I'll just keep working longer. And that just led him to a place where He was knackered. I'm sure we've all been there. You go, I'll just keep working through this, it'll be fine. And he just needed, I think, some space. But it's so hard to get space when you're working at a million miles an hour, isn't it? Um, he also had these kind of perfectionist tendencies, which was also then triggering the change, triggered that more. And he was getting himself sucked into this working late cycle. And then that meant he wasn't doing his running, he wasn't looking after himself, and you know the knock on impact of all that. So we went back to the roots of what is and what isn't working. We explored with the manager's hat on how the manager might be feeling, what their style and preferences were, where those sort of pain points were between the two of them. It's a super common challenge I get actually with work transitions. It's not getting along so well with the manager. He was able to actually share his feelings because he wasn't feeling like he was in a safe place to do that at work, and got him to think really differently. He experimented a lot with his manager because sometimes you have to, right? If they're very different, try a few different things, until he got to a place where they could at least communicate better, understand each other better, and have a much more productive working relationship, which then had a knock-on impact on what are the true expectations here, and how do I make sure then that I'm meeting those and shaping the role around the expectations of the company. He really needed to set some boundaries. He identified that it had got out of control. So what boundaries did he want to set for himself? And because he felt more secure then with his boundaries, he was more rested, he was doing what he needed to do, he felt more capable, he felt stronger, he was able to be more proactive and able to prioritize and manage the sheer volume of the workload better. And sometimes we just need that reset, especially if we get stuck in the working late, the loss of boundaries. I'm dreadful for a loss of boundaries. That can be really difficult. But for David, just taking that time out, understanding what was going on behind for him, and was able to help him move forwards. So going back to the slides, that was David's story. So the final one of the three elements that are important for successful work transitions is preparation. Some people love preparation. I am one of them. Some people really hate it, but it doesn't have to be that tough. So preparation. Majority of people do not prepare and plan thoroughly for work transitions. They just sort of, through no fault of their own, sort of get hurtled at it. But feeling prepared and having that plan helps you take control of those controllables. And it gives you a confidence that others will notice and feel, which then feeds into the capability, how people view you, being able to do the swan-like thing. But without it, people lose time. So with a specific focus on new role transition here, there's a big differentiator between people who prepare for a new role and people who don't, and the speed to which they get up to speed, how productive they are, and how they're viewed by their new organization. So I always say to people, if you're getting a new role, plan before day one. It significantly increases your chances of success. But if it's after day one, the best day to start is today. So making that proactive first step, taking the time to prepare in advance of any work transition, or as best you can. We're not always in control of the timings, of course, but gives you the time, the credibility, and it can help you make better decisions. So when it comes to preparation, I get quite a few people going, oh, I don't want to prepare, or do we have to do it in a detailed way? No, you absolutely don't. You've got to understand what you have to prepare for, though. So what are the absolute essentials that you need to do when you're feeling calm, you've got the space and the time to think, to help you move at speed and be proactive, and take those opportunities? How best to go about preparation for them? So some people are mood board people. I'm not, but it works for them. And if that's managing their future career, brilliant. It could be a spreadsheet. I'm a big lover of a spreadsheet. But how best to go about the planning varies from person to person based on style. But not doing it has an impact. So it's just finding which way to do it best for you. And then it's just like, what is that next step for getting it done? That accountability. It's not doing it all at once. What's the most important or time pressure thing I have to do now in order to be able to move forwards? Things don't always go to plan. I always used to say to my team, you need to have an idea of where you kind of want to be in 5 years, but it doesn't have to be set in stone. And to be honest, it probably won't go to plan anyway. But if you think of your development plan or your career aspirations or your ideas for how you want a new role to be or how you want to feel when you come back from maternity leave as a compass rather than a map, then it's just pointing you in a direction that's aligned with your values that you've done in the reflection time, and it helps you make better decisions at pace. So it's okay if things don't go to plan because it's not a map, it's a compass. So my final story for you is Claire. I think I've stopped sharing, but yes, I don't know. Have I stopped sharing the slides? Yeah, great, thank you. Having to flip between these has been a new challenge, but it's nice to be able to talk to you. So Claire actually came to me because she was a senior manager at a marketing firm, and she'd just gone through a restructure, and she was really glad that her role had been protected as part of that restructure, but it had changed. And it changed significantly. She described it as they've taken all the fun and left all the responsibility. And there's a couple of people smiling. Yes, I think a few of us have been there. But it meant that she didn't have the development opportunities in her role anymore that she did before. So she felt quite trapped. But she also didn't want to leave. And this was a relatively recent one. And we know that the market has been a bit tough. And I think she was like, I want to make this work. And I like the company. It's just disappointing that some of the projects I was working on that I knew were going to help me grow are now no longer there. They've actually gone to my boss. She dreaded planning. She didn't really want to have to plan or think about her career. It had kind of been given to her to an extent before then. And she was like, I don't like planning. But then that made her feel stuck because she couldn't see how she was going to move forward. And she was really frustrated. She also wasn't making the time to think about it because the restructure had meant a lot of change, fewer people. She was a lot busier. She had a mentor, which was brilliant, but the mentor had just told her what she already knew. They were like, you need to work out what you want and have a plan to go and get it. She's like, well, it's all well and good saying that, but how do I go and do that? Especially because the thought of planning just like makes me feel sick. So she was just struggling to know how to do that in a way that was going to work for her. So she kept getting stuck in this loop of thinking again, oh, this role isn't what I want anymore. Oh, this is so frustrating. Oh, it's so unfair. So she came to me and said, I want to make a really well-informed career decision. Do I stay? If so, what do I do? Or if I leave, what am I going to go and look for? And she wanted that plan. So we went right back to values and goals again. This is why that clarity bit around values and goals and knowing who you are and what you want is really important. So we went back to that and we talked about what she actually wanted from her career, from her life, from her as a person, what her options were where she was, and what the external options really were. Because there are sometimes a lot of assumptions when it's not our immediate world about what is actually the other option. So going back to her true wants and needs and just making some lists of things. Didn't have to be big, scary spreadsheets or big, complicated plans. A few lists of what inspired her, what she wanted from her work and her role, then what her options were, and then scoring different options against them, which was actually quite a fun task. Made her be able to step back and say, oh, actually, I do want to stay on balance. So if I'm going to stay, I need to do this, this, and this to rebuild and reshape some of the development opportunities that I need and want. She actually made a really confident career decision at the end of it, and she actually went back into her managers and her organization with almost like a list of things that she needed. And she said, you've told me I'm great. You've told me you want to keep me. These are the things I need in order to be happy, develop, etc. here. And she got all of them. She got all of the things on her list because she was really clear. You don't have to be demanding about it, right? It's just about saying, these are my needs, these are my wants. And she was essentially like, give me more. but in a different way. So she completely got her mojo back, which was so lovely to see. And she was able to then decide how she wanted to shape the rest of her career at that organisation. As far as I know, she's still there, which is good. So that's Claire's story, and that was also the final of the three key elements for successful work transitions. So the next element is that there we are, is that enabler underneath. And I've touched on it quite a bit already in several of these. And unsurprisingly, there will be a little bit of plug for what I do, but it's really important to understand what support is necessary for successful work transitions. So a lot of people actually lack the support necessary to handle change. A lot of organisations say to me, "Oh no, our people don't struggle with when there's been a restructure. Our people are fine when they gain loads more responsibility," or "Oh, we've never had anybody say anything when they become a new leader." I'm like, yes, but that's they're not telling you. So organisations are not often giving the support necessary for the change. So I see time and time again people struggling with it on their own. The right support removes that loneliness, gives you the reassurance, and helps maintain the emotional balance that is all askew when we go through a change. And there are two types of support that you need for a successful work transition: internal and external. I'll explain what I mean by both of those. So internal are like within your world already. So within your organisation, and also friends and family, which is really important. Friends and family are awesome for unconditional support, and they're also really helpful when you want a perspective on that more kind of personal happiness perspective. So, for instance, once I was offered a job and my husband was like, "Well, that commute would have a real impact on whether you're able to go to running club. Are you okay with that?" Sometimes you just need to have that kind of discussion to help decide whether it's the right thing for you. But he's massively biased, hugely. He's like, "Oh, well, does that mean you're going to be able to have as much rest or whatever?" Very valid point, really important. But obviously, they're much more focused on your personal and happiness perspective. Co-workers, managers, mentors, absolutely important to reach out for support from those people. They understand your workplace really well and the culture, which is very important. And they're so useful for getting feedback and hearing those different experiences of how they overcame something. But internal support is rarely enough on its own because of those biases, which are helpful, but you've got to be aware of them. So external, such as coaching, a completely external coach can give you objectivity and confidentiality that are thinking game changers. So objectivity removes these biases, removes the politics, removes thoughts about their own career or how much time you might have for them. It just keeps it super clean and clear. Confidentiality is also really important because knowing that you can say pretty much anything and you won't be judged and it's not going anywhere else allows us to do that digging deep that I mentioned before, because sometimes we have to say some things aloud that we're maybe not proud of or we're maybe a bit ashamed of, and we all have that. And it's never wrong. It's just about really unpacking it and understanding it and helping us move forward so that we can think or be the way we want to be. And that's why working with a one-to-one with a really experienced, qualified and accredited coach helps you challenge your own thinking and keep those thoughts and those perspectives at the front of your mind and help you keep on track. So how do you get the support? Well, I am a detailed person and I do love a structure, so I've made a little diagram. So internal support, two things to start with. It's really important to share how you're feeling with your friends and family. Don't keep it to yourself. You do need that personal support. Consider what, if any, support might be available within your organisation. It's not always as great, which is why I do what I do, but some are much better than others. With internal support, it's super important to be mindful of who you spend your time with. There's that phrase, isn't there, that you are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. I think that's really true. So if you have a negative Nelly in your life, don't have change conversations with them. So be mindful of what you're going to get back, how that's going to make you feel, and is it going to be helpful for you? If appropriate, identify a couple of people at work who might be able to give you that perspective that you need. But I'm always keen to remind people to be really deliberate with the conversations you have, not just in who you choose to speak to, but with the time you spend with them. So set objectives for each person in interaction. What do you actually want from them? What bit of their brain do you want to pick? Because a chat is nice, but it's not helpful, doesn't help move you forwards. But be really mindful of those biases. And then external. So how do you go about getting external support? Identify somebody who's experienced in leadership, change and transitions. Check they're qualified in coaching and accredited with a major professional body. Majority of proper coaches have a complimentary kind of discovery or chemistry call. You need to prepare for that again. Be deliberate about what you want out of that call. How do you make a good decision? And it's so important to work with someone you feel you can open up to and who you think will understand you. There's a stat that says that 40% of the outcome of any kind of therapeutic interaction, like therapy or coaching, is down to the relationship between the coach and the individual. So important. So, stepping back, my top tips for successful transitions in a nutshell. Be proactive. Steer your own ship. Know who you are. Go for it. Be really careful about who you talk to because of the influence they will have on your thoughts and feelings. And get support, all of it, because change is hard. Even if it's awesome change, it's hard. Anyone will tell you that, I mean, I don't have children, I have a dog, but it's the same principle that, my friends always say, it's the hardest thing I ever did, but it's also the most amazing thing. Doesn't mean it's not hard just because it's positive. So be proactive, be mindful who you talk to, and get support. It's not easy, and that's okay. We're all feeling it, even if we don't show it. And it takes energy, proactivity, and lots of support to get it right. So one-to-one coaching with me is a solution, surprisingly, a solution that includes all the 4 things that are most missing, because I've seen a lot of people go through transitions time and time again, all different kinds. And the 4 things that are most missing are that confidentiality and objectivity, the appropriate amount of challenge, that digging deep into root causes and being honest with ourselves, and those thinking appointments, that dedicated time. And that's why I do weekly at first, usually, depending on the change that someone's going through, and then start spacing them out to every other week, then maybe monthly. So it depends on the person, the change, the program. Confidential 1-hour online sessions that fit in around people's diaries. But they're booked in advance at a time that suits, and I hold people to them. And I check in if I haven't heard on people for a while. I prepare, if you've not been through coaching before, it feels a bit weird at first. And I always say the first session's a bit like a pancake. It's still tasty. I'm still going to eat it, but the first one is never that great. So I give some info on how to prepare for sessions so that you maximize them each time. And I really, truly believe in autonomy. I've explained my personality preferences, and I think it's really important that you take responsibility for your own notes. And I don't really do kind of homework unless somebody asks for it. Of course, some people really need some support with a few extra bullet points or notes. I'm totally fine with that. But my general approach is autonomy. So how does it work? So as I mentioned, there's a complimentary call that can be booked directly on my website, and my calendar is always up to date on there. Super convenient. You get then a tailored quote, depending on the change that you're going through, or the leadership challenge that you're going through. You get a quote with some suggested number of sessions, duration, investment, and I offer payment plans as well. And then you book your first online session with me and we do the work. So it's that simple. And as a bonus for kindly joining me today, you can have a free 1-hour accountability session 6 months after completing your coaching program. So it kind of holds you accountable to the work that you've done and keeps it going. So if that's something you'd be interested in, if we do work together, then just quote that in your context call and I'll add that onto your quote. And that's worth £275. So it's a really good, juicy little bonus there to keep the good stuff going. Current availability is tight. I only have so many hours in the day, and I do other things as well. So there are only 2 slots left to start working with me this month now. So if you're interested, you can book a call, drop me a message on LinkedIn, you know where I am. But go smash that transition. Whatever is on your mind, you can absolutely do it. And now you know the things that are essential for helping you get there. I hope that was useful and interesting and got you thinking a little bit differently. And now we are open to a quick bit of Q&A. Has anyone got any burning questions or anything that they'd like to share? There are a couple of reflections from the beginning that I can comment on while you're thinking if there is anything you'd like to ask. So there's a few people that said they've done something for quite a long time and then experienced a change. And that's really common, either being with one organization for a really long time and there becomes that fear then of what else is out there and will I know how to deal with that because I've been in the same place for a long time. And the answer is absolutely yes, so long as you follow some of the conditions that we've talked about today. I've seen people, take 10, 15 years out for families and come back. And knowing the conditions that you need to be successful now, not 15 years ago, is important then for making that change work for you now. I had somebody come back from maternity leave and they were saying, I just can't get back to where I was before. And with some work, they got to a place where actually I can't get back to where I was before. I don't want to get back to where I was before. I've changed, things are different. So it's okay and for things to be different. It's just knowing how you need it to be different for you right now. So that's a bit of a theme from some of the others. Just scanning these, but do chip in if anybody's got something in the meantime. So there's a couple of references here to wanting to be intentional, wanting to plan ahead. Definitely recommend spending time on yourself first. Go back to those foundations of who am I, what do I want, what are my values, how do I articulate that, and then how do I build the career and the life that I want around those. So the reason I work the way I do is that freedom is my number one value. And I was deeply unhappy in corporate, didn't understand why for a very long time. And it was because of my number one value being challenged. I just didn't know it was freedom and I couldn't articulate it for a long time. So when I get offered an opportunity, and I have been offered quite a few jobs since I started working for myself, it all looks shiny and exciting. I'm like, woo! And then I have to go, hang on a minute, how does that sit with my values? So being intentional always comes back to values. It's like when you go shopping for a house. If you go to a, if you walk in and you're like, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful, it's the most dream house. You forget things like budget, practicalities. So planning in advance what your budget is, what your need to haves, you would do that when buying a house. And we need to do the same for our careers and going into any kind of change. There's quite a lot of themes here about how do I be clear to myself. Hopefully I've touched on that enough. A lot of people wanting to make choices in their decisions. Hopefully I have touched on that too. I don't think there's anything in the Q&A. No. Any reflections that anyone would like to share? Any final questions before we wrap up? No. Well, I hope that you got something out of that. Hope you're thinking a bit differently about change and how you can take proactive control of your own career, your own work, and your own life. And you know where I am. So thanks very much, everybody. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for putting the session on.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.